And now let's share. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're going to skip over the Zoom toolbar stuff. And we'll start with introductions.
Okay. I'm going to introduce Jackie Zev first. She's treasurer for the WRJ Pacific District. She's a past president and past treasurer for the Sisterhood of Temple Ahava Shalom in Northridge, California. Currently, she is technology chair, honey fundraiser chair, and First Friday lead Onig hostess for the Sisterhood of TAS. She's also Ovada chair for the TAS Religious School and is on the board of 2 other organizations. She earns her keep as a software engineer and manager at Northrop Grumman. She's been married to her best friend, Mark, for 31 years and has 2 awesome sons in their mid-20s. Our tech person is Shari Carruthers. I hope I haven't butchered your name. She's a WRJ North American board member and an area vice president on the WRJ Pacific District Board. She's past president of her sisterhood, Shalom Women at Peninsula Temple Shalom in Burlingame, California. Her background is in accounting, specifically in managing small offices and personal assisting. Shari is currently retired with her husband, John, who she has been married to for 40 years. They have 2 children, Rachel, who is 34, and Matt, who is 31. I am Maddie Plumer, currently serving on my 2nd term, 4th year as the president of Sisterhood at Temple Bethel in Tacoma, Washington. I'm retired after 44 years of teaching at the elementary grade level, highly capable and gifted programs, enrichment classes, as well as mentoring new teachers and teaching behavior management and conflict resolution classes. I live with my husband of 53 years. I have 2 adult daughters, 1 son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren.
Thank you, Maddie. So I plan on talking a little bit about financial roles, which is a interest of mine, and then budgeting, of course, a little bit about software, and maybe we'll get to donate buttons. I don't know, that's a little technical. We might skip that. So typically in a sisterhood, there are 5 basic finance jobs on the right. Someone has to make deposit checks. Someone has to approve whatever disbursements are done. Someone has to actually generate those disbursements. And a budget needs to be generated. And someone should kind of monitor the budget throughout the year. And in different organizations, different people will do different roles. Typically, organizations have a treasurer. They may or may not have a finance chair. They may or may not have a budget chair, and they definitely have a president or some other leader. So, for example, in my own sisterhood, we have the treasurer write the checks and generate the budget, although actually we've been farming out generate the budget to someone else lately. The finance chair makes the disbursements, and the president is supposed to both approve each check that's written, each disbursement, and also monitor the budget. However, that's not how it's done in all organizations. For example, I'm part of a group called the American Association of University Women, and in that group, the treasurer makes deposits and writes the checks, but the finance chair generates the budget, monitors the budget, and approves the disbursements. The president isn't involved at all in any of that. And in WRJ Pacific District, the treasurer both makes the deposits and writes the check. The president approves the disbursements, but the budget chair generates the budget and monitors the budget. So you can see there's a wide variety of, and there's no one correct mode to operate in. Personally, I I'm in favor of taking the president out of the picture. I think that the president has enough on their plate that approving the disbursements and monitoring the budget on their plate as well just means it gets done poorly. That I think there should be a dedicated person, either a finance chair or a budget chair, who deals with the budget, monitors the budget, and approves the disbursements. But that's my personal opinion. I have not been able to convince my own sisterhood of that. So let's go on to budgeting. One thing, I always open any budget session by mentioning that budgeting should reflect your sisterhood's values. That if something is important to your sisterhood, it should be in the budget, even if the sisterhood doesn't think they're going to spend money on it. It should also reflect your sisterhood structure. It should give a feel for what kinds of things the sisterhood thinks is important, what they're going to spend money on, and basically a guide to the sisterhood's organization and programs. And it's always important to remember that budgets set goals and guidelines, but they're not cast in stone. You can overrun your budget, you can underrun your budget. It should not restrict you from accomplishing what you want to do. Unless you have some stray person where you need to restrict them, and then it's a hard and fast rule. So talking about how budgeting should reflect your sisterhood structure, here's some examples of, again, drawing from the 3 organization where I'm involved in budgeting. In my sisterhood, we have an administration section. There's almost always an admin section. My sisterhood is really big on events and fundraisers, on leadership and mitzvot, and then on religious observances. So there's a section on each of those. Those are the 4 things that my sisterhood focuses on. So there's a section for each of those in our budget. In AUW, the focus is more on the programs we provide, our community involvement, and our membership. So, and then there's an administration section. So again, it reflects the things that are priorities for AUW. In WRJ, they're just getting to the point. I've been encouraging them to organize their budget into sections more. And so there's a section for donations and assessments that would be analogous to the mitzvot section that is in sisterhood. Scholarships have become very big, and now they have a whole section for scholarships. And then one of the things that WRJ spends a lot of money on is paying for their board to travel to conferences and conventions. So there's a section on that. So you can see where each of the organizations, the budget reflects their priorities. So some tips is useful to have a pre-budget meeting to go over the actuals from the previous year. Any budget meeting has 3 sources of information to drive the budgeting. One is last year's budget. Organizations don't usually start from scratch. Usually they start from a previous budget and then revise what needs to be revised. The second is the actuals, what they actually spent on last year, or maybe the last few years. Usually they only go back a year. And then the third thing is soliciting input from people who are putting on programs on what they think those programs are going to cost. So having a pre-budget meeting is very useful in the second of those, which is looking at the actuals and making sure that all the numbers are correctly categorized. I have seen numerous budget meetings get derailed where things were miscategorized, and so the numbers didn't look right. And then people were like, wait, how come we didn't spend any? I know we spent money on this. Well, it's because the money was miscategorized, and then you don't know how much money actually was spent. So it's good to have a pre-budget meeting to review the actuals and make sure that they look, that your meeting won't get derailed by people questioning last year's actuals. So in planning the budget meeting, it is good to have your budget meeting after all the summer planning meetings, after the membership meets, after the program meets, after, if you have an education committee, after all the things that are going to spend money. Those groups should all meet before the budget meeting, and the chairs should be reminded that they need to discuss how much money they're going to need and how much money they think they'll take in their meetings, so that when the budget meeting comes along, you know what those numbers are. So every chair who has a line item in the budget should be invited to the budget meeting. That the problem with doing that is that with a lot of people in the room, it can slow down the meeting. So so that brings up the third bullet under budget meeting, is that you need to be aggressive about focusing the conversation on the budget and not letting it get side railed with, oh, so how much money are we really going to? No. You need to walk into the meeting with all those numbers. Don't discuss them at the meeting. And if the chair for a line item doesn't know what the numbers are, then say, okay, we're going to leave that. We're going to put an estimate in, and you need to go away and come back with what the real number is, because otherwise the meeting will take forever. And I suggest projecting the budget on the wall if you have that capability, because you can then fill in the numbers as you go, and people can see those numbers, and people like that. So that's not necessarily something everyone has available to them. So couple of things. Sometimes you'll have an account in one budget that won't be in the next budget. You want to leave that in, because otherwise it'll mess up your actual numbers. You want to plan for expenses that you don't expect. So like, for example, our sisterhood will often get asked by the temple to do some special project, right? Can you pay for signs on the bathroom walls that say something, whatever. Oh, I think one year it was a new towel dispenser or something. And so we put in a line item for special projects that we can use. So these are projects that we don't know about at the beginning of the year that might come up during the year. So that's a really useful thing to put pre-plan into your budget, because then your board can say, yes, we want to do this. We have a line item we can use to cover it. On the other hand, don't forget that budgets aren't cast in stone. So it's always acceptable to just say, okay, we didn't budget for this, but we're going to spend the money anyways. And the last line item here, balancing your budget, people have different philosophies about whether your budget should be balanced. My preference is that you don't try and balance your budget. And so if it's negative, you show that as a negative. And so you have, hey, we're budgeting $10,000 in the hole, or whatever it is, which my sisterhood has done. And let that be an in-your-face line item. Matter of fact, one year we budgeted about $2,000 in the hole, and an angel stepped up and said, if you can keep the negative to $2,000 or less, I will cover it. So we tried really hard that year to keep the negative to less than $2,000 so that she would cover it. We tried so hard that it actually ended up positive. So she did not have to cover anything. So, but other people think that no, budgets should always be balanced. And so if you budget in the negative, it means you're taking money from your reserves, and so you should have a line item for the reserves. One of the reasons I don't, if you have a lot of money in reserves and you want to hide that, then having it as a line item in your budget might be something you don't want to do. So that's a philosophy thing. Okay, formats. Most organizations use what I would call a P&L format, profit and loss format. They list all the income and then they list all their expenses. So you can see the top of a P&L format budget. And that is a fine format to use. Lots and lots of, I would say almost every organization I've ever seen a budget for uses a P&L format. One nice thing about it is that P&L gets generated out of accounting software, so it's really easy to generate. However, my sisterhood does a lot of fundraising, a lot of events, a lot of things where the same event takes in money and spends money. And we always wanted to know what the net is. And P&L is particularly bad about giving you net, right? In the income, you'll have, we had our paid up membership brunch. And in the expense, there'll be the expenses. And what's the net? It doesn't show anywhere. Very annoying. So I came up with another format. I forgot that you take your actuals from last year. If you're using P&L, you take your actuals, you put your budget, and then you can put another column. Do I have the other column? Yeah. So this is typically when you're said and done, if you're using a profit and loss format, that it would have the budget for the previous year, it would have the actuals for the previous year, and then you fill in your budget for the current year. So the format I came up with for anyone who wants to show the net is what I call a tri-column format. So for each category, you have a column for income, a column for expense, and then a column for the net. And you have that for last year's budget, which I came up with these slides a few years back. So this is a few years back budget. And then you also put in a column. Oh, so here, this is example. So here, the columns on the left, there's either income or expense, right? And the net is the difference, but there isn't both. But here on the right, you see where we have events and fundraisers. So we had Bingotini, we have the income, we have the expense, and we have the net. So, and of course I love color. So I made all the expenses red, I made all the income green. If there was only expense, I made the category red. If there's only income, I made the category green. If there was both, I made it purple. So that probably makes it a little harder to read than if it was just one color. I don't know. So here on this slide, I'm showing the admin side by side with the events and fundraisers. On the actual sheet, they would it'd be one long column, which I think, right. So here, this is quite the eye chart, but here we have all on the left, we have all our categories, all our accounts. These three columns are the previous year's budget. These three columns are the previous year's actuals, and these three columns are the current going forward budget. And then I always have a column for comments, so which often has the date of events, or it has how the number was calculated, or it has what it's being used for. It's very useful to have notes like this. So you can see how it gets total up, like the total admin, the plan was to be $1,000 in the hole, which would then be made up for by the events and fundraisers, which would hopefully be positive at the end of the year. So one of the problems with this tri-column format is that it's hard to fit it on one page. So when I've generated these and printed them, I typically print it on legal paper rather than letter paper. So if it's not too bad on legal paper. So anyway, so whatever format you use in your budgeting meeting, you walk in with your budget and your actuals and maybe a suggested going forward budget. And in your meeting, you have to go through each line item and decide how much you think you'll take in, how much you think you're going to spend, and hopefully balance at the end, or be in the green at the end. But don't be afraid to be in the red, because typically my experience has been that organizations budget for things and then don't spend as much as they budget. So even when you're in the red, you typically finish the year less in the red or even in the green than you had budgeted. So, oh, software. So my experience is that most sisterhoods use QuickBooks because at some point they had an accountant who put them on QuickBooks. And once you're on QuickBooks, you cannot go back to Quicken. You can move from Quicken to QuickBooks easily. You cannot go back. And but Quicken is a simpler program and is all that's needed. One thing I would say is that there is an organization called TechSoup where you can get QuickBooks substantially cheaper than you can on the open market, like maybe a quarter of the price of, I think QuickBooks on the open market is like $300, and you can get it via TechSoup for $78. So if you are on QuickBooks, then, and the other thing I would say about QuickBooks is don't be in a hurry to upgrade every year. There's just no need. I think we're on like 2016 right now, and it's just fine. So, and then for budgeting, people typically use something like Excel. So I don't know how easy it is to budget in, yeah. So, and I think that's most of, oh, so for all the treasurers here among us, I suggest that your budget be put into QuickBooks or Quicken, whichever is being used. And the best way to do that is to put the entire budget into the first month. And then you can generate budget reports every month that'll show where you are relative to your budget. So, so in theory, you can space it out over the months, but there's just no advantage to doing that. You're like going to be guessing about what months you're going to be spending. Yeah, just put it all in the first month and done. So I have a bunch of information about PayPal versus Square. So the organizations I've been involved with have, like they mostly started out on Square and they've mostly abandoned Square for PayPal. So PayPal fees are going up. So that's, I think these numbers for PayPal are, no, these are the new numbers because it says 2.9, used to be 2.7. I forget whether these are the old numbers or the new numbers, but we don't pay 2.9, we pay 2.2 because we're certified as a charity. And so, and then I have a whole bunch of stuff on PayPal buttons, which I think I'm not going to go through because they're useful for anyone who views this afterwards and wants to know how to set up PayPal buttons. But so what questions can I answer?
I have no questions in the chat so far.
And I don't have any questions. Good slide deck though, Jackie.
Yeah.
And this is why Jackie does our budget. She's good.
Oh my.
I
Very good. Very good.
I really enjoy numbers, and what is budgeting but numbers. So
Yep.
so yeah, when I was treasurer of our sisterhood, then I jumped on the budget. Before I was treasurer, they didn't organize the budget into categories, and there was like 100 line items vaguely organized alphabetically. I was like, no. This is not acceptable. So I organized it into categories, and then I came up with the tri-column format. Because I wanted to know how much each event was making, and that wasn't available. We have a lot of events. I think our event section has 20 line items in it. And even some of the things that aren't strictly speaking events have both income and expenses, and we want to know what the delta is. So
How many sisterhood members do you have in your congregation?
about 130 out of a congregation of 250-ish. So percentage-wise, we do pretty well.
Yeah.
We would like to get more younger members involved, but
Oh, that's it. We all hear that.
wouldn't everyone?
Yeah.
You know, one of our my vice president who has a younger family, who I hope will be the president next year. I pray every day. She felt like, you know, we have to stop having that as a goal, and we just have to be present at events where the younger families are, to try to have one-on-one relationships established, and to be part of like the B'nai Mitzvah group and any celebration they have. And I thought that was a good thing, because we've been beating ourselves like that every year. How do we get new members that are younger? And I think I hear it from the congregations that when I'm involved in workshops, it's just it's there for all of us.
Yeah.
So
Terrific presentation. Thank you. I think I'm going to share this with Marlene, who's our treasurer. She's new to the job. So she's being mentored by our old treasurer, but I think it would be very helpful.
about 3 or 4 months ago, I did a meeting specifically oriented towards sisterhood treasurers. And at the time they said, oh, we should do this like quarterly, right? But then quarterly meant about now. So I said, well, I'm not going to do it now, because anyone who wants to do it can come to area day, right? And there's going to be a treasurer's presentation there. But the problem is that this one competes with all the other presentations that are going on. And it's not clear to me how much the message got to the treasurers that this was available, right? So they heard about area day, but did they know that there was a treasurer's presentation? I don't know. So I think I'm going to try and bring that back, like maybe right after the high holidays, and we'll put out a sisterhood treasurers come ask your questions kind of thing.
Good idea.
And,
Good idea.
Great idea.
and do that.
Yeah.
Jackie, I'm going to bow out, take a break for
Actually,
about an hour.
why don't we close this off, and if there's something else that's interesting, you can go join that. Sound good?
You want to stop? Yeah, want to stop recording?
I think I have to stop sharing first.
There you go.
Thanks to all of you. Thanks, Jackie.
Yes.
It was
Thanks,
wonderful.
Thank
Jackie.
you. Thank you, Diane, Joanne. Thank you for joining us. All right.
Bye.